There's something strange and comforting about the way some habits settle into our bones, as steady as the ticking of a clock. Every morning, like clockwork, I open my eyes at exactly 6 a.m. I don't need an alarm, haven't for years. Whether the sun is shining or the sky is hidden behind a blanket of thick clouds, I always wake at the same time, never a moment too early, never a minute too late. It's like my body remembers for me, as if some invisible string gently tugs me into the day, even on those dull, gray Winchester mornings when the fog clings to the garden fence and the heavy clouds block out the sun. I rise with the same quiet discipline. The light struggles through the worn old curtains of my small home, but still, like a promise kept, I'm awake. My feet touch the floor, my joints groan their usual complaints, and my day begins. First thing I do is put on my sweater, the one with the worn elbows Esther used to patch for me, and head outside for my walk. 3 laps around the garden, that's my ritual. Of course, I'm not running. At 78, jogging would be a bit much. Dr. Holly would scold me if I tried. But a good, steady walk brisk enough to get the heart going, that's what he recommended. 20 minutes a day, no excuses, he always says. And I've followed his advice. After my walk, I make myself a simple breakfast, oatmeal with a little honey stirred in. I get the honey from Mrs. Forrester, who lives just a few houses away. She swears her bees are the happiest bees in Winchester, and that's why the honey tastes better. I don't know if bees feel happiness the way we do, but I believe her. It's good honey, sweet and golden, and it reminds me of quieter, sweeter times. Once I've eaten, I step outside again, this time not for walking, but to tend the garden. It's my haven, this little patch of green tucked away at the edge of Winchester. Since I retired, it's the one place where I feel truly alive. Every plant in that soil carries a memory. Every rose bush, every lavender stem was planted by Esther and me. Though she's been gone for 6 years now, I still say we when I talk about the garden. I suppose I always will that sometimes when I stand among the roses, her favorites. I feel her presence in the stillness. It's as if she's there with me, watching over the blooms with that gentle smile of hers. Esther passed quietly in her sleep. We had nearly 50 years together, side by side through the everyday joys and heartbreaks. We moved into this house after Aldous started school. Before that, we lived in a cramped little flat closer to the city center, saving every penny to afford. This place, when we finally bought it, it wasn't anything grand. 2 floors, 3 small bedrooms, a modest kitchen, but to us, it was a castle. These days, I don't go upstairs much. My knees don't allow it, and the rooms are heavy with memories, so I moved my bedroom downstairs into what used to be my study. It's simple now, a bed, a small table with a lamp, a wardrobe, and a framed photo of Esther smiling from the wall. That's how I want to remember her. Smiling. Spring keeps the garden busy. There's always something to be done. Trimming hedges, loosening soil, pulling weeds. My hands aren't as quick as they once were, but I manage. I lose myself in the rhythm of the garden. There's comfort in the work, even when it's tiring. Now and then, Mrs. Bennett from across the street stops by with a plate of cookies. She's 72, also alone, also kind. People in the neighborhood whisper that we should keep each other company in a more serious way, but we both know that chapter is closed. Quiet talks about the weather and our grandchildren under the apple tree are all we need. Lunch is usually something light, a bowl of soup, maybe a sandwich. Afterward, I sit with a crossword from the Times or put on one of the old black and white films I love. On warmer days, I might walk to the park, sit on my usual bench, and feed the ducks as they paddle through the pond. It's a quiet life, peaceful and steady, marked by the gentle ticking of the old clock that's lived in my living room for decades. Wednesdays are different. On Wednesdays, I visit my son. I take the bus to the city, then another one to his suburb. Aldous often offers to drive me, but I always decline. As long as I can manage it on my own, I will. It's my way of keeping hold of a little independence. Aldous is my only son. His birth mother passed away when he was just 5. Esther came into our lives 2 years later. She loved him as if he were her own, never once making a distinction. Between him and our daughter Mira, who came later and now lives far away in Australia. Mira calls every Sunday, always full of energy, chatting about her life, her children, the weather in Sydney. I miss her, but I understand life moves on, and I don't want to pull her back. Aldous was always serious as a boy. Focused, determined. He got a good education, studied hard, and now works as an engineer for a big drilling company. He lives nice home, 2 cars, holidays with his family. From the outside, he has everything one might want. He married Della 18 years ago. They have 2 kids now, Noah, 16, and Ellie, 14. After Esther passed, Aldous stepped in to help with my finances. "You think too much about money, Dad," he told me. "Let me take care of it. These days everything's online, you don't need to stress." I agreed. He was always smart with numbers, and I preferred to spend my days in the garden, not sorting through bank papers. So he set up my pension to go straight into an account he managed. Every week, he'd leave a small envelope of cash on my knit stand. For my expenses, it was a smooth arrangement. I trusted him completely, and I was grateful. But now and then, when I asked about my accounts, he'd brush me off. "Everything's fine," he'd say, "or you know how inflation is. The pension doesn't stretch as far as it used to." Still, my house was fully paid, my bills weren't high, and after 4 decades at the post office, I had a solid pension. One Wednesday, I arrived at Aldous' place around lunchtime. As always, Della opened the door with her usual polite smile, the kind that stayed far from the eyes. She never warmed to me. Not unkind, but never welcoming either. Just formal. "Hello." "Marvin," she said, stepping aside. "Come in. Dinner's nearly ready." And that's when everything started to feel a little different. "Is something wrong?" I asked. No. It's just you know how it is with banks. They're always sending some kind of offer, some kind of advertisement. "I don't want you to worry about nothing." I nodded, but inside everything clenched with a bad feeling. As I got out of Vecker and watched Aldous drive away, it suddenly seemed to me that there wasn't just a wall between us, a chasm that was growing wider every day. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I kept thinking about the conversation I had overheard about my son's strange behavior. Something was going on, something he didn't want to tell me. And somehow it had something to do with money. Mine or his, I didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, I felt uneasy that I had entrusted my finances to Aldous unconditionally, and without question. It had been 3 weeks since that strange conversation at Aldous' house, and I couldn't help but notice the change in my son's behavior. Usually, he called at least twice a week to see how I was doing, if I needed help with the house or the garden. Now Fefon was silent. Our weekly Wednesday was also canceled. First because of a promised business trip, then because of an urgent project. Then simply too busy, Dad. Sorry. I didn't want to seem intrusive, so I only called myself once. Della answered the phone, said Aldous was at work, and promised he'd call back. Hadn't. It was strange and not like our usual routine. I was used to a certain order in my relationship with my son, and the sudden disruption of that order was unsettling. Maybe I had done something wrong, hurt him in some way. I mentally went over our last conversation and couldn't find anything that could have caused this reaction. One day, he went to the supermarket and met Mrs. Kingsley, the mother of Noah's classmate. She was the kind of woman who knows everything about everyone and is happy to share information. "Man," she exclaimed when she saw me in the vegetable department. "What a meeting! How are you doing? You must be very proud of Alda and Della." "Hello, Helen," I replied, perplexed. "What exactly am I supposed to be proud of?" She rounded her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry. You thought you knew." Their new house in Richmond Hills. Robert and I were there last week helping Della pick out colors for the living room. The place is amazing. The ceilings are so high and the view of the park is breathtaking. I tried not to show my surprise. "Oh yes, of course. It's just that they've been so busy with the renovations that we haven't been socializing much lately. Oh, I understand." Mrs. Kingsley nodded. "There's so much work going on. Della said they're completely remodeling the kitchen and bathrooms, and the pool promises to be absolutely marvelous when it's ready. My Robert is even a little jealous. We talked about the weather and the kids some more, then parted ways. I walked home slowly, mulling over what I had heard. So they had bought that house they were talking about after all. A house in Richmond Hills, Winchester's most prestigious neighborhood, where bankers, lawyers, and doctors lived with a pool and a view of the park. When I got home, I called Aldous right away. Again, Della answered again, saying her husband was busy and would call back. I asked her to tell him it was important. By late afternoon, there was still no call, so I decided to call my grandson. Noah answered after the fifth ringtone. "Grandpa, what's wrong?" He sounded surprised in his voice, as if I had never called him before, which wasn't far from truth actually. "No big deal. Just wanted to see how you were doing. It's been a while." "Ah," he stretched out. "Well, fine, I guess. It's just Thatevion's really busy with the move and all." "Moving?" I decided to pretend I didn't know anything. "Well, yeah, we're moving to a new house." Dad didn't mention it. Mentioned it in passing, but no details. Noah suddenly perked up. "Grandpa, you have no idea how cool it is. I'll have my own room with a private bath." Then Daddy promised to make a play area in the basement and a pool. A real pool in the backyard. None of my friends live in a house with a pool. "Sounds wonderful," I said, trying to make my voice sound happy. "When are you moving in?" Dad says in a month if the renovations are finished in time. We've already got boxes standing everywhere. Mom's going crazy trying to get everything organized. We talked for a few more minutes. Then Noah said he had to go. Some game with friends online. I sat in my living room looking at Esther's picture on the mantel. What would she say now? Probably something wise about the kids being grown and living their own lives. But still, why didn't Aldous tell me about the new house? And where did he get the money to buy one? I've done the math. Aldous makes good money, but not enough to afford a house in Richmond Hills. Della makes a good salary at her agency too, but, again, not enough to buy a house like this. And according to an overheard conversation, the son couldn't get a large loan because of credit history issues. Something didn't add up here. The next morning the mail came. Among the flyers and phone bills, I found an official envelope from Merchant Trust Bank. Usually, all bank documents came to Aldous' email account, and I hadn't received a paper letter of this nature in a long time. I remembered Myson's request not to open financial correspondence, but curiosity and anxiety were stronger. Inside was an official notice dated last week. The bank was informing me, Betrayal, of a late payment on a mortgage loan in the amount of $770,000. The letter stated that the first payment had been made on time, but that the second, which had expired 10 days ago, had not been received. The bank warned of penalties and possible further penalties if the non-payment continued. I reread the letter 3 times, unable to believe my eyes. A mortgage loan in me name, $770,000. There must Be some mistake. There must. I'd never taken out a loan like that. I haven't taken out any loans at all since I paid off the mortgage on this house almost 20 years ago. I immediately called Aldous. No answer. I sent a text. Son, I need to talk to you urgently. Please call me back. Nones were. I had all kinds of thoughts going through my head. Could this be some kind of scam? Fraudsters using my data, or a mistake by the bank? But then why did Aldous ask me not to open bank correspondence? And why isn't he answering his phone? I decided I had toked on my own. I got dressed and drove to the Merchant Trust branch in downtown Winchester. It wasn't my usual bank and everything. Inside looked unfamiliar. Glass partitions, fancy chairs, employees in smart suits at their computers. A young woman with the badge, Olivia Marshall, loan officer, invited me into a small office for a consultation. I showed her the letter and explained the situation. Mr. Trelone, she said, typing something quickly on her keyboard. Let's check the information in the system. May I see your ID? I held out my passport to her, and she checked the information. Yes, that's correct. She nodded after a moment. You do indeed have a mortgage loan open with our bank in the amount of $770,000. The loan was originated. She looked at screen. Exactly 2 months ago on the 15th of the month. But I didn't take out that loan, I exclaimed. Olivia frowned. That's odd. It says here that you were personally present when you signed the documents. We even have a copy of your passport and your signature on all the paperwork. May I see those documents? She nodded, and after a few minutes, she handed me a folder with copies of the loan agreement. I slowly looked through the pages, and with each one my heart beat faster and faster. There was indeed my signature on every page, or at least a signature that looked very much like mine. The passport information was mine. The address was mine. But I had never signed those papers. That's not my signature, I said quietly. I mean, it's similar, very similar, but I'm not Theon who signed those papers. Olivia looked alarmed. Mr. Trelone, do you realize what you're saying? If someone forged your signature and got a loan in your name, that's a serious offense. I understand. I nodded. And I don't know who might have done it, but I know for a fact that I never came to your bank and signed those papers. It was a lie. I knew perfectly well who had done it, or at least strongly suspected, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. And what was the loan for? I asked. Olivia looked at the paperwork. To buy real estate, a house in the Richmond Hills neighborhood. Maple Street, number 22. My suspicions were confirmed. The house Mrs. Kingsley was talking about, the house my son and his family were soon to move into, the house bought with a loan taken out in my name without my knowledge. Who owns this house now? I asked, already knowing the answer. Olivia looked at the paperwork. According to our records, the house is registered to Aldous Trelawney and Felone is in your name. I felt the room swim before my eyes. Aldous, my son, forged my signature, took out a huge loan in my name, and bought the house in his name. And now he had stopped paying on that loan. Mr. Trelone, are you not feeling well? Olivia asked. Worriedly. No, I'm fine, I replied, though it was far from the truth. Tell me, what happens to this loan now with the late payment? If the payment is not made within 30 days of the delinquency, the bank will begin collection proceedings. Considering it's been 10 days, you've still got 20 days. And what do you mean by foreclosure proceedings? In your case, since the loan is a mortgage, the bank can begin the foreclosure process. That is, the house will be sold to pay off the debt. In addition, it will seriously affect your credit history. He nodded, trying to comprehend the information. What should I do if I believe the loan was fraudulently arranged? Olivia lowered her voice. In that case, you should file a fraud report with the police. That's a serious charge, Mr. Trelone. You need to be sure of your word. I thanked her for her help and walked out of the bank. My head was spinning with thoughts and emotions. My own son had deceived me, used my name, my spotless credit history to get money for his dream house, and didn't even bother to tell me about it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he stopped paying on the loan. Why? Was he really planning on just dumping it all on me, make me pay for his ambitions, or was he hoping to get out of it somehow before I found out? I sat down on a park bench across from the bank, trying to gather my thoughts. What do I do next? Go to the police, report my own son, or try to work things out within the family? I called Aldous again. No answer again. I sent another message. I know about the loan. We need to talk immediately. No response. So I decided to take a different course of action. I took a cab and drove to the address on the loan documents. 22 Maple Street, Richmond Hills. Richmond Hills lived up to its reputation as an upscale neighborhood. Wide tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, large houses standing at a respectful distance from each other. The cab stopped in front of a 2-story mansion of light-colored stone with columns at the entrance and large windows. Workers were busy around the house putting up a fence, digging a hole for a swimming pool in the garden, and people with tools and building materials coming through the open doors. I paid the cab driver and walked slowly toward the house. No one paid attention to me. An elderly man in plain clothes was not interesting among the workers. I went inside through an open door and stopped in a spacious hall with a marble floor and a spiral staircase. The house was luxurious even as it was being renovated. High ceilings, huge windows, expensive materials. "Hey, you, what do you want?" shouted a man in a suit, apparently in charge of the work. "I'm looking for Aldous Trelone," I replied. "This is his house." "Ah, you're here to see Mr. Trelone," the man nodded. "He's not here right now. He'll be in later. Are you the contractor?" "No, I'm his father." The man smiled and held out his hand. "Oh, nice to meet you, sir. I'm Harry Donovan, the project monager. Your son has chosen a beautiful home. We are doing our best to finish the work by the deadline." "And when are the renovations scheduled to be completed?" I asked. "In 3 weeks, if there are no delays in materials. Mrs. Trrell1 is really rushing us. She wants to be able to move in before the school year starts." I nodded and said he'd just look around if he didn't mind. Harry allowed it and went back to his business. I walked slowly through their rooms, looking around at my son's future home. A huge living room with a fireplace, a dining room, a kitchen the size of my bedroom and living room combined, a study, 5 bedrooms on Thescan floor, each with its own bathroom. In the backyard, a barbecue area, a future pool, and a 3-car garage. All this splendor must have cost at least $1 million, if not more, and it was bought with money taken in my name without my knowledge and consent. $770,000, a sum I couldn't repay, even if I sold my house and gave away all my savings. I walked out into the backyard, looking at the workers digging the excavation for the pool. Suddenly, I felt anger like I hadn't felt in years. Aldous hadn't just tricked me. He'd set me up, used me, and threw me away. He didn't come and say, "Dad, I need your help." Didn't ask. Just took what he wanted without caring about the consequences for me. And now he stopped paying on the loan. Why? You ran out of money, or did he think that he could not pay at all? And when the bank starts the collection procedure, all the problems will fall on my shoulders. Anger and frustration overwhelmed me, but I realized that I had to act rationally. First, I had to know my rights and options. The next morning, I opened the phone book and found Wilson and Associates, a law firm near my home. I had never dealt with lawyers except for the probate process after Esther's death, but the situation called for professional advice. The office was small but neat. 3 offices and a reception area with a receptionist, a young woman who politely offered me coffee while I waited. 15 minutes later, I was invited into the office of Ronald Wilson, an older man with gray hair and an attentive gaze. "What can I do for you, Mr. Trelone?" he asked as I sat down across from his desk. I told him the whole story about my son handling MI finances, about the accidentally discovered loan, about the house in Richmond Hills. Wilson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in his notebook. "I understand your situation," he said when I finished. "Unfortunately, these cases of financial abuse in families are more common than one might think, especially when elderly parents are involved. What are my options?" I asked. Wilson folded his hands. "On the table, you have several avenues. The first is to file a fraud report with the police. This is a serious charge that could lead to criminal prosecution of your son. On the plus side, the bank will likely cancel the loan if it can be proven that you didn't take it out. The minus is the obvious consequences for your son and your relationship with him." I nodded, feeling a heaviness in my chest at the mere thought of my son potentially being sued. "The second option," Wilson cautioned, "is to file a civil suit. You can challenge the validity of the loan agreement on the grounds that the signature was forged. This is less legally serious for your son, but that process can be protracted and there's no guarantee of success. Banks are very reluctant to admit errors in paperwork. And the third option is to try to resolve the issue within the family. Talk to your son, explain the situation, demand that he take responsibility, and reissue the loan in his name. But to do that, he'll have to prove his solvency to the bank, which, judging by what you say, could be problematic." I wondered. None of the options seemed appealing. "What would you advise if you were me?" I asked. Wilson sighed. "In cases like this, I always advise you to try to resolve the matter peacefully first. Talk to your son, explain what you know about the loan, and offer to make things honestly right with him. If he refuses or continues to avoid communication, then you will have to take more serious measures." I thanked him for his advice and paid for the counseling session. As I left the office, I felt a little more confident. At least now I knew what my options were. Upon returning home, I immediately called Aldous. As expected, he didn't answer. I left a message. "Son, I know about the loan in the house. We need to have a serious talk. Please call me back." There was no response that day or the next. I called again and again, but Aldous seemed to vanish into thin air. Even Della stopped answering the phone. On the third day, I decided to do something different. I went to their old house, but no one was there. A neighbor said she'd seen them loading their stuff into the car yesterday. Moving to a new house, she explained. Della's been telling everyone how beautiful it is, and they're planning a housewarming party next weekend. Housewarming? I interjected. "Well, yeah, a big party." Della said, "All of Aldous' co-workers, their friends, some important people from town are invited. They want to make an impression, you know." I nodded, feeling the anger boiling up inside again. They're throwing a party in a house bought in my name with a loan that's already past due, and they didn't even think to invite me. What's more, deliberately avoiding it so I wouldn't find out. At that moment, something broke in me. All doubts and hesitations disappeared. I returned home, took all the documents related to the loan, and went to Ronald Wilson again. "I haven't been able to get in touch with my son," I told him. "He's been avoiding me, and I learned that they're planning a housewarming party which naturally I'm not invited." Wilson nodded. "Understandingly. In that case, I suppose an amicable solution is not possible. What do you want to do next?" I want to file a fraud report and get a court order for eviction, I said firmly. Wilson looked at me carefully. Are you sure? This is a major step that could change your relationship with your son forever. Our relationship had already changed when he decided to use me in this way. The days that followed passed in turmoil, a statement to the police, a deposition, a signature examination that confirmed the forgery, an appeal to the courts. Wilson worked quickly and efficiently. Perhaps the fact that the case was egregious played a role. Or maybe the judge simply sympathized with the elderly man who became a victim of financial fraud of his own son. Either way, by Friday, I had in my hands a court order declaring the loan agreement invalid as having been concluded by fraud, as well as a warrant for eviction from the house bought with the money and seizure of property to compensate for the bank's expenses. What now? I asked Wilson as he handed me the papers. Now these papers have to be handed over to the bailiff who will conduct the eviction proceedings. This usually takes time, but given the circumstances, you can speed up the process. Speed it up how? Much? Well, theoretically, the bailiff can come any time the owners are in the house, even this weekend if you insist. I thought back to the housewarming party the neighbor had mentioned about the party where Aldous and Della would brag about their new Hometo friends and co-workers. Yeah, I said, that's exactly what we'll do. Saturday evening was warm and clear. I sat in Wilson's car in front of the house on Maple Street, watching the guests drive up. Men in suits, women in evening gowns, expensive cars, gifts, and beautiful packages. The bailiff, Mr. Baxter, waited with us. A large man with a nonchalant face for whom such situations were part of his daily work. Are you sure you want to do this? Now? Wilson asked one last time. Why don't we wait for the guests to disperse? I shook my head. No, let everyone see what's going on. Let them know how this luxury was obtained. We got out of the car and headed towards the house. Music and laughter could be heard even through the closed windows. There was a man at the entrance checking invitations, but Mr. Baxter just showed him his ID and he nervously stepped aside. Inside the house glowed with lights. Flowers were everywhere. Waiters were serving champagne and a verve, and guests gathered in groups admiring the interior. The renovation had been completed and the result was impressive. Expensive furniture, paintings on the walls, crystal chandeliers. Everything screamed wealth and success. We walked through the hall to the main living room where the most people were. I noticed Aldous at once. He was standing in the center of the room with a glass in his hand, saying something to a group of men who were listening intently. Della was nearby, dazzling in a silver dress, accepting compliments from the guests with a smile. They didn't notice us until Mr. Baxter tapped the metal handle of his briefcase on the table, drawing attention. Good evening, he said loudly as the room fell silent. I'm James Baxter, Hampshire County Bailiff. I have a court order for eviction and seizure of property. There was dead silence. Allies turned to us. I saw Aldous freeze with his mouth open, unable to believe his eyes. Then his gaze shifted from Baxter to me and recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by horror. Dad, he squeezed out. How did you get here? He pointed silently at the bailiff. Baxter stepped forward, holding out the papers to Aldous. Mr. Aldous Trelone, are you the owner of this house purchased through a mortgage loan made out in the name of Min Trelawney? Aldous didn't take the papers, continuing to look at me. Dad, what's going on? His voice shook. You know what's going on? I answered calmly. You took out a loan in me name without my knowledge, forged my signature, bought this house, and stopped paying on the loan. A whisper drifted through the room. Guests began to glance around, some backing away as if not wanting to be part of the unfolding drama. Mr. the Trelawney, Baxter continued, still holding out the documents to Aldous. According to the court order, The mortgage agreement has been declared null and void as having been entered into by fraud. The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings. You and your family are ordered to vacate the premises within 7 days." Della, who until that moment had stood in a daze, suddenly came to life. "What?" she exclaimed, coming toward us. "There's some mistake, Aldous. Tell them." But Aldous was silent, his face as pale as chalk. He knew he had been caught red-handed. "There is no mistake," I said, looking straight at my son. "You took out a loan for $770,000. In my name, without my authorization, listed the house in your name, and when it came time to pay, you just stopped returning calls from the bank, hoping that all the problems would fall on my shoulders. Is that true, Aldous?" Della turned to her husband, her voice ringing with tension. Aldous finally came out of his stupor. Hess straightened, his face taking on a hard expression. "You don't understand, Dad," he said. "I was doing this for the good of the family. I had no choice. The bank wouldn't give me a loan like this because of that old business story. And we needed a house worthy of our position. And that's why you decided to set me up?" I asked. "I didn't set you up," Aldous objected. "I was going to pay off the entire loan myself. There were just some temporary difficulties at work, and he had to miss a couple of payments. I would have made it up if you hadn't made a circus of it." "Circus?" My voice remained calm even though everything was boiling inside from possibly losing everything. "I have. Do you realize the bank could take my house if I couldn't pay your loan?" The room became completely silent. Even Della was silent, shifting her gaze from me to her husband. "I would have repaid everything," Aldous repeated stubbornly. But his voice didn't sound as confident anymore. "I've always taken care of you, always looked after your finances." "Looked after my finances?" I grinned bitterly. "You mean embezzled my money? You think I didn't realize that my pension should be enough for more than the crumbs you were leaving me?" Aldous opened his mouth to object, but Baxter interrupted him. "Mr. Trelawney, I must complete the procedure. Please accept these papers and acknowledge receipt." Aldous mechanically took the papers. Della beside him looked like she was about to faint. "All these people," she whispered, glancing around at the guests, many of whom were already moving slowly toward the exit. "My friends, your coworkers, what will they think?" "They'll have to think your husband is a crook who cheats his own father," I replied. "How can you do that?" Della exclaimed, her face contorted with rage. "You're ruining our lives. Over some misunderstanding. Aldous has always cared for you, always helped you, and you repay him like this." "Misunderstanding?" I interjected. "Forging a signature, executing false documents, taking out a loan in someone else's name. That's not a misunderstanding, Della. It's a crime." Aldous, who had previously stood with his head down, suddenly stepped forward. "Dad, let's talk in private. I'll explain everything. I'm sure we can find a solution." "A solution has already been found," I replied, pointing to the papers in his hands. "You have a week to vacate the house, and be glad I didn't go further and insist on criminal prosecution. You can't do this to us." Della was on the verge of hysterics. "Where are we going to go? What are we going to tell the kids?" "You still have your old house as far as I know," I pointed out. "We sold it to pay the down payment on this one," Della reprimanded. I felt a prick of regret, but quickly suppressed it. He wasn't the one who had created this situation. I wasn't the one making these decisions. "Then you'll have to come up with something," I said, "like you've always come up with when you want something you can afford." Aldous took another step toward me, his face contorted with desperation. "Dad, please, I swear I'll fix this. I'll find the money. I'll write you the loan to myself. I'll do whatever I need to do. Just don't do it. Not now. Not like this." I looked at Mason, the man I'd raised, the man I trusted, the man I loved against all odds, and I saw no remorse in him. Only fear of the consequences, fear of public humiliation, fear of losing the home Heckle never afford. "You've already made your choice, Aldous," I said quietly. "When you decided you could use me and my name for your own purposes. When you forged my signature, when you stopped answering phone knowing that credit problems would come after me." I turned to Wilson and Baxter. "Are we done here?" Wilson nodded. "Yes, the formalities are complete. Mr. Baxter will be back in a week to supervise the eviction if the house is not vacated voluntarily." I looked one last time at Aldous and Dela, standing in the middle of the lavish living room, surrounded by the few remaining guests who were now looking at them with a mixture of pity and judgment. "Goodbye, son," I said. "I hope this lesson has taught you that you cannot build your happiness on another's misfortune, even if that stranger is your own father." With those words, I turned around and walked out of the house, feeling the stares of everyone present. Behind me, I could hear Della sobbing and some of the guests trying to comfort her, but I didn't turn around. My heart was heavy, but my decision was firm. I knew that this night had changed everything, that there was no turning back, that my son would never forgive me for this public humiliation, just as I couldn't forgive him for the betrayal. But in that moment, I felt only one thing: a strange, bitter relief that I had finally done the right thing by protecting myself, even if the cost was the last thread that connected me to my family. After that night, my life was divided into a before and an after. The silence of the house, which had once seemed cozy and familiar, now pressed down on me. I sat in the chair for hours looking at Esther's picture as if looking to her for answers to the questions that had been weighing on my mind. Had I done the right thing? Was it too cruel? What would happen to Aldous and his family now? Ronald Wilson Kaledweiss, updating me on the progress of the case. The bank had invalidated loan agreement after a signature examination and a police investigation. The house was seized and had to be sold to cover the expenses already incurred by the bank. Aldous and his family moved out on the third day after the housewarming party without waiting for the official eviction a week later. Where they had settled, I did not know. Aldous didn't call, didn't write, didn't visit. It was as if a wall had grown between us. But I didn't expect otherwise. I realized that my son would not forgive my public humiliation, just as I could not forgive his betrayal. I received my first call from a family member on the fourth day after the incident. It was my daughter Mira from Australia. "Dad," her voice sounded worried. "What's going on over there?" Della called me sobbing into the phone, saying something about the house and the loan and how you ruined their lives. He took a deep breath and told Mira the whole story about the loan, about Pfeffer's signature, about the late payments, about the housewarming party. Oh my God. She exhaled when I was done. "I can't believe Aldous did that. But Dad, maybe we should have handled it some other way. Not in public, not in front of all their friends." "How?" I asked. He'd been avoiding me for weeks. Wouldn't return my calls. Didn't show up when I asked to see him. What was I supposed to do? "I don't know," Mare admitted. It's just so drastic. And now they're without a house. Noah and Ellie are worried." "They had a house," I reminded her, "the one they used to live in. They sold it for something they couldn't afford. It was their choice, not mine." Mira was quiet for a moment, then said quietly, "I understand you, Dad. I really do. It's just, I'm sorry about what happened." We talked some more about other children, about work, about the weather in Sydney. The usual topics that now seemed so insignificant against the backdrop of what had happened. Before saying goodbye, Mira said, "Dad, I was going to fly up for Christmas, but now I don't know. Would it be a good idea? The atmosphere probably won't be festive." "Do as you see fit, dear," I replied, feeling a new wave of bitterness. I'll understand either way. After talking to Mira, I couldn't sleep for a long time. For the first time in years, I felt really alone. Before, even after Esther's death, I had a family. Even if it wasn't closest, even if we didn't see each other often, but it was there. Now, I was all alone. And that thought scared me more than I was willing to admit. The next call 2 days later came as a surprise. It was Delum Vin. Her voice sounded cold and official. I'm calling at the request of the kids. They want to talk to you. I felt my heart clench. My grandchildren whom I love despite their cool attitude toward me in recent years. Of course, I said, I'm always happy to talk to them. There was a rustle. Then the voice of Ellie, my 14-year-old granddaughter, came through the phone. Grandpa. Is that you? Yes, honey. How are you? How am I? Her voice suddenly snapped to a scream. Are you realizing how I am after what I've done? We're living in a motel. A motel? All my stuff is in boxes. My friends make fun of me at school. How could you do this to us? I hadn't expected such an onslaught and didn't immediately come up with a response. Ellie, I understand that you're upset, but your dad, my father, has taken care of you for years, she interrupted, and you repaid him like this. You're a mean, cruel old man. I hate you. There was acre in the receiver, then a rustle again, and Della's voice. See what you've on? Happy? Without waiting for my answer, she handed the receiver to Noah.